Hi, welcome back to Dish by RMU Culinary, a weekly installment where we show you delicious food. My name is Chef Brad with the Institute of Culinary Arts at Robert Morris University in downtown Chicago. On this week's episode of Dish, we're going to make a classic tomato soup, cream of tomato soup actually, with a little bit of fresh basil in it. I think it's a perfect warm your bones kind of dish for these cold winter months. So we're going to get started in a saucepan. We're going to add just a little bit of olive oil. And I have the saucepan already heated up, and it's over medium-high heat. And I have one small red onion that I've diced up. And we're going to let this saute in our oil. And while that works, I've got a clove of garlic. I'm going to smash it with the side of my knife and peel the skin off. And I'm going to do a rough chop. I'm going to puree this soup in the end, so we don't need to have really fine cuts on our garlic or our onion. I just want to get them all relatively the same size so it cooks at the same speed. So we're going to add this garlic. You're welcome to certainly add more or less garlic as you like and what your preference is. And we're going to cook this for about 2 minutes just to get the onions nice and tender. And I'm going to add in some fresh thyme at this point. Thyme is a little bit of a hardier herb, so it's okay to add it earlier in the cooking process, whereas the fresh basil is such a fragile herb, we're just going to add it right at the very end. I don't really want to cook it very long in the soup itself. And it's a fragrant herb as well, the basil, so it will pack a lot of flavor into this soup. Just a little salt and pepper. And then I've got a 28-ounce can of plum tomatoes, and these are whole tomatoes. This time of year, fresh tomatoes just really are not that great, and canned tomatoes, you're going to get a better flavor out of it than if you were to use fresh tomatoes. And then I'm going to add in 1 quart of chicken or vegetable stock. And I had that boiling just because I didn't want to lower the temperature of our soup for very long, or lower it very low. So adding a hot stock to a hot soup keeps your temperature hot, and it'll just continue that cooking process along the way. So we're going to let this simmer for about 10 or 15 minutes. You can go longer if you'd like, but 10 or 15 minutes is plenty to bring all the flavors together. And while that happens, I'm going to pluck some of my fresh basil, and I'm laying them flat on a cutting board. And I'm going to do a knife cut called a chiffonade. Chiffonade just means ribbon in French. So we're going to roll the basil up as tight as we can get it and slice it into thin strips. Okay. So after your soup has simmered for, like I said, 10 or 15 minutes, then we'll add in the fresh basil. I want you to look at the surface of the soup. We've got some tiny bubbles around the edge of the soup. It's not at a roaring boil. A lot of times if you cook soup too fast or at too high of a heat, it's going to pull out too many. Primarily this is the case with meat-based soups, but it's going to pull out too many impurities from the meat itself. So cooking things low at a simmer is going to gently heat the soup and pull out the flavors a little bit nicer. So we're going to add in about 1/4 cup of fresh basil and just give that a stir. And we're going to pull it off the heat. And I've got an immersion blender here, and we're going to puree this until it's smooth. If you don't have one of these, a regular blender works. I would just caution you to only fill your blender up halfway and cover it with the lid and then hold the top of it with a towel. Just because as you turn on the motor, the steam is going to want to go someplace and you don't want that lid to fly off of there. So we'll blend this until it's smooth. So we've got our soup blended. It doesn't take long once your tomatoes are fully cooked. And we still see flecks of that fresh basil in there. And then I've got 1/4 cup of heavy cream just to finish it. You're certainly welcome to add more, but I think that just 1/4 cup adds a really nice amount of richness to the finished soup. Okay, and so then to plate our dish, we've got a nice bowl. And we're going to ladle some soup into our bowl. This is great with grilled cheese, classic tomato soup and grilled cheese. This is actually featured in one of our pop-up restaurants out at our Orland Park campus last fall, this tomato soup recipe. And they served it with grilled cheese as a dipper. So we got our soup, and then I've got a nice sprig of fresh basil that we're going to stick right in the top. And then just a drizzle of olive oil right on the top adds a really nice finishing touch. So this is our creamy tomato basil soup. For this recipe and more, please visit robertmorris.edu/dish. We'll see you next week.